So, just to be clear, this is a mock draft that is based on what I would do and not what I think will happen. With that said, let's get started. To start off, we have Bryce Young going number one, and I know that Frank Reich has never really played with a small quarterback, but if he can't adjust his offense to thrive with a small quarterback, I think that's a sign he shouldn't be your coach, anyways. And that's as somebody that likes Reich. I think he was done pretty dirty by Colts management, but Bryce Young is a special talent. He is an artist with the football, and though his improvisational skills are not at a Mahomes level, they're at about as high of a level as you can see for a college quarterback. So that ensures his high end play, and we've already seen that he should have a really high floor because he's had such success statistically and film wise as well. So there's kind of nothing to really pick at with him aside from the fact he's a little bit small. As you can see, at number two, the Texans could go any number of ways at quarterback. And for me, I'm going CJ Stroud because though he may not be the most exciting prospect, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing coming out of Ohio State because then we could even question more how much of it is just a college thing. What he does will translate to the NFL very easily because he is very accurate and can make any throw, even when he's on the move, even though he doesn't show that as often as you would maybe like. The Georgia game is going to be the quintessential proof that he can do anything you ask a quarterback to do. But he's going number two just because, unlike with Bryce Young, I didn't see it every single play with him. He also can read defenses, which some people contest, but it was more so just his lack of quote unquote reading defenses was from his receivers being wide open all the time. This is the point where I think it makes a ton of sense for the Cardinals to trade back. And I think it also makes good logical sense for any of the number of teams that would trade up. But I don't do trades in mocks because I think it just cloudies the process. So for the Cardinals, I'm going to draft Will Anderson, who is a blue chip prospect in his own right, but doesn't have as much of a spiraling downward to him as Jalen Carter does right now. So Will Anderson will be the pick, and really, I don't think you can go wrong either way. I think they're both incredible players, and really, there's basically nothing wrong with Anderson. So it's not like he's a consolation prize by any stretch. The Colts completely lucked out because at pick number four, they have an incredible talent that could arguably be the number one pick, and they have an offensive coordinator that has had tremendous success with a, no offense to Jalen Hurts, but a lesser athlete at quarterback. So Shane Steichen will really be able to craft a run game for Anthony Richardson, and I think Gardner Minshew will be good enough for the Colts that Richardson doesn't need to start day one. But even with him playing early, if he has to, I'm not as worried as most people are because I think his athleticism gives him such an incredibly high floor that if nothing else, he could be a Justin Fields type who shows you magical things with his legs and does enough as a passer to get by. The Jalen Carter skid will stop at number five, as there's another perfect pairing of Seattle needing defensive interior and Jalen Carter being the best player on the board by far as well. So I like this pick for them. I think he can do everything that Draymond Jones can do, but better if you're looking down the line a bit. So that's a pretty scary tandem to have because Draymond Jones is a premier pass rusher from the interior. So if Jalen Carter can be even more than that, your duo is going to be scary for years to come. And also, not to brush off his run defense at all, he's great in that regard as well. So he'll be able to pitch in a variety of ways. If you're Detroit at 6, you have the option to take a swing at a quarterback or try to make this team as best as it possibly can and contend with Jared Goff, which I think is a losing proposition because I just think Goff taps out at about an average quarterback. And sure, he can excel in the role of doing no more than what average quarterback could do. It's hard to win that way. And Will Levis gives us a higher ceiling as he has less athletic deficiencies than Jared Goff, meaning he actually can run some, and he doesn't have a severe drop off in his reading of the defense as you would expect because Levis is actually pretty good at making and going through his progressions. So he should be able to fill in pretty seamlessly, but Goff can start for this year and Levis can beat him out moving forward. The Raiders have a tough decision at 7 because there is a legitimate discussion between Christian Gonzalez and Devon Witherspoon. And for me, I'm actually going to go Gonzalez because the more it marinates with me that he's had 2 great years, is an athletic freak, and has done it in zone, man, off, press, in the slot, you name it, he's done it. I think it's hard to go wrong with Christian Gonzalez. And that's not to say that Devon Witherspoon is not also going to be a star in the league. I think they both will. I feel just a little bit safer with Gonzalez. So he'll be the pick for the Raiders. And just in case you doubted my sincerity, I'm drafting him here for Atlanta because Casey Hayward has been a solid number 2 for them in his 1 year in Atlanta, but he is 34, I want to say. So he's definitely getting up there in age. And I would feel safe with both Witherspoon and Terrell in man coverage without help. So that's pretty terrifying to think of what you could do with the rest of your defense with not needing to allocate too many resources to guarding a number 1 and number 2. Tyree Wilson is the pick at number 9, and he is just an absolute unit. He's 6'6" and has a 7'2" wingspan. So if you like tall power rushers, you're gonna love him. He gives sort of Rashawn Gary vibes, just mainly they're athletes that didn't put it together in college. So if you're optimistic, that's what you could get with Tyree Wilson, who is just in that Gary or Trayvon Walker level of athlete, dare I even say. So if you can get the most out of him physically, you're going to have a all-pro level player for years. This might be a slight reach, but Brian Branch is pretty much the only player that can fill a need for the Eagles, and he fills it really well because he is a very high IQ guy that can cover in short areas. He's done it as a slot corner. And with Sean Desai's defense, safeties are basically needed to have slot corner skills. So the fact he's listed as a safety is only true for some teams. He's only going to be a safety if it allows him to play like a nickel corner. And in that case, the Eagles are a great fit as he will be basically just an additional slot corner. I like Quentin Johnston to the Titans because he'll give them a legitimate outside wide receiver, and between his run after catch ability and Treylon Burks's, the Titans will really be able to maximize Tannehill's ability to get the ball out on time and in stride. Both Jackson Smith and Jigba and Peter Skoronski would both make sense as well, but with Skoronski, I'm a bit fearful of him converting to guard, and with Njigba, I think he may actually be the better wide receiver. It's just his range of outcomes are a bit less exciting as it seems like he's guaranteed to be solid to very good as opposed to Quentin Johnston, who could be anywhere from okay to out of this world good. Jackson Smith and Jigba and Robert Woods are a little bit redundant because they're both going to work the shallow game and not offer much as athletic profiles, but he's the best player that's left on the board, and there's not too many viable receivers on the Texans right now. Nico Collins is just okay. John Mechie hasn't played yet. So Jackson Smith and Jigba could come in and be perhaps their number one day one. The Jets have a tough decision to make as there's two tackles on the board that both make sense. But for me, I'm going to go with Paris Johnson Jr., who is a freakish athlete and is sort of the inverse of Peter Skoronski in the sense that Skoronski only has 32-inch arms, whereas Paris Johnson has complete tree limbs of 36-inch arms, which is a notable difference. Johnson has very long arms, Skoronski has the shortest you can get away with. So I like Paris Johnson for that reason, and I also like that he fits in with their outside zone scheme. The Patriots currently just have Marcus and Jonathan Jones for cornerbacks, and unfortunately, there's no Jones to be drafted. But the next best thing is Joey Porter Jr., who fits their system perfectly as he's 6'2 and can press you for days. So he'll fit into their man press scheme perfectly and will really be a versatile weapon for them as he has a body type that is different than both of the Jones they have. And that's something that Bill Belichick has shown throughout history he's enjoyed having is guys that are a different type of matchups than what he currently has on the team. He's always tried to have as much variety as he can. The Packers don't have many holes, but one issue they might have down the road is at edge because Preston Smith is good, but he's making pretty hefty amounts of money. So it may be a cap casualty for Preston Smith eventually. So in comes Lucas Van Ness, who is a pretty seamless replacement because he's a similar body style of being about 270 as an edge rusher and consequently being a massive power rusher as well. So hopefully Van Ness can learn behind Smith and Rashawn Gary, who are both similarly oversized edges. One pick I really like is Peter Skoronski to Washington, and what I like about it is it allows him to try to beat out Andrew Wiley, who is a solid tackle, and if he can't do that, you get a massive upgrade at guard. And I'm talking Peter Skoronski could be one of the premier guards in all of football, if not year one, within the first 2 years of him being a pro. So I would take that with pick 16 any day of the week. I like Deonte Banks to the Steelers because he's ran every coverage there is, and that'll help him with the sophisticated system that the Steelers run that ask a lot of the corners. And if nothing else, he'll be replacing Patrick Peterson within a year or two because though I like the signing, at the heart of the move was desperation, and I wouldn't imagine that Peterson has too many years left in him, so it'll be nice to groom, hopefully, a long term answer with Deonte Banks, who resembles Peterson in some ways, as they're both freakishly athletic and tall corners that use their physicality well. I wouldn't say Banks is at an elite level yet, but he definitely could be with refinement. Kalijah Cansey to Detroit is another favorite pick of mine because it brings together that he's the best player left on the board, he fits a need, and he plays nicely with what their roster already has in place because Aleem McNeil is a really solid run defender, and that's what you need Cansey around because he's not going to be very good as a run defender. He's going to be more of a pass rusher, but McNeil can also get after the passer. So on third downs, they can unleash their full pass rushing potential, and on early downs, they won't get punished because McNeil is good enough as a run defender that they won't be super susceptible to the rushing attack either. With the releasing of Donovan Smith, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really need an offensive lineman, and Broderick Jones is a good mix of right now, but also down the line because he has the athletic profile of a player that will be able to start right away, but he's not very refined right now. So, for him to be at his best, he is going to have to develop for quite some time, which they do have a good deal of because they just came out of being in a Super Bowl window and are in, if not a rebuilding, a retooling period right now. So, he will be allowed some time to develop, which is nice. I think Miles Murphy is the best player left on the board, and again, it's at a position of need. And between the addition of Miles Murphy and Jalen Carter, the defensive line of the Seahawks will go from being a real weakness to being one of the most promising young defensive lines in the NFL because they also have Taylor as a rotational guy who's a pretty good pass rusher. So they can go three edges deep, and I don't see why there can't be a lot of versatility with where everybody's placed. I could see Miles Murphy on passing downs being moved more to defensive tackle. I think he's that great of an athlete that he's going to be great wherever you put him. But there's a lot of versatility you can have with Jalen Carter and Miles Murphy. So that'll be something exciting for years to come. Brian Brzee to the Chargers is a pick I really like. And let me start out by saying that, yes, I realize he is almost entirely a project and has very few refinements as a pass rusher, and he's too upright as a run defender. With that said, he is a Cam Hayward level athlete, which is something I would always like to bank on. And he's had success as a pass rusher in college, so it's not completely ridiculous to think that he can improve upon that as a pro. I think Brzee is a deceptive need for the Chargers as well because currently they have Sebastian Joseph Day and Morgan Fox as their defensive interior, and that's a solid enough 1-2, but beyond them, there's not really anybody you feel comfortable with. And Joseph Day had a bit of a disappointing year this past season. So it's not saying we bank on that happening moving forward, but at least you are planning for that as well and are getting still a guy with very high upside in Brzee. If the Ravens didn't have Isaiah Likely, I would have considered Dalton Kincaid to them here, but I'm going to be a little bit safer and select Jordan Addison, who is a really good number 2 wide receiver, and that's really what he'll have to be in Baltimore because Mark Andrews is going to be the number 1, even though he's technically a tight end. So I think he'll be able to play off of Andrews really nicely, as I think they're both exceptional route runners for the position. So that should give them some resemblance of a passing offense this year. Despite having Justin Jefferson, who might be the best receiver in the NFL, the Vikings are kind of weak at wide receiver, and we're going to eradicate that issue with Zay Flowers, who is a really nice jitterbug with the ball in his hand, and he has a lot of development that can be done with his route running still, but I trust him to improve upon that, and he is an athlete enough that if he does refine his skill set just a bit, he will be very, very difficult to defend. So I like the duo of Zay Flowers and Justin Jefferson for years to come. Speaking of teams that have one great player at a position and then no one else, the Jags have Josh Allen as a great edge rusher, and then it's Kayvon Chason, I guess. So Nolan Smith will fill a gaping hole and will hopefully be what Chason was intended to be. Though the Giants have thrown resources at the receiver position, they still need some help there, and believe it or not, I think Dalton Kincaid is the best pick because though he's listed as a tight end, he's basically just a big wide receiver. And take that for what you will in the positive and negative sense, as positively, he runs routes as crisply as the best tight ends in football do, where it's basically a wide receiver doing it. But he's also not fantastic as a run blocker yet. He is roughly 240 pounds, so it's just tough for him to be physical enough with defensive ends or even some larger linebackers at that size. But he does try his hardest there, and he's not an issue as a blocker. So I think both he and Waller will present a lot of mismatches and be very difficult to cover in the modern defenses of base nickel defense. The departure of Dalton Schultz has left the Cowboys needing tight end, and fortunately for them, Michael Mayer is still on the board, as he could be their main blocking tight end while also being a great short game receiver. So he provides a lot of value for what Dallas wants to do because they're going to be giving the ball lots of Pollard. And when they're passing, they're looking at Lamb and Cooks and Gallup before they're looking to the tight end. So Mayer will be in his sort of ideal role where he'll just be a check down guy as opposed to having to be a full focus of the offense, which he just might not have the speed and route running to do. I think it's time the Bills look in the mirror and realize that Spencer Brown is not their long-term option as right tackle, and someone that could be, though, is Anton Harrison, who is a really solid pass protector, and he's not strong enough currently to be much of a run blocker, but they're not running in Buffalo anyways, and if they are, it's just Josh Allen kind of doing it on his own anyways, which he's gotten by with for so long. So why not beef up the pass protection and hopefully take some less hits on Josh Allen while still allowing him to make the special plays happen on the grounds? A guy PFF isn't very high on, but I am, is Osiris Torrance, who is a really strong bruising guard who will excel in wide zone schemes, as though he's 330 pounds, he can really get out there and move. No matter what, he's probably going to succeed, though. He just has the ideal body type to be a guard, and he has the ideal mentality as well, as he is always going to try to lay you out just as the play's ending. You could go for tackle at this pick as well, but I choose to believe that Lowell Collins is still a good starter, even if this past year was not his strongest work. So I think if he improves and you get Torrance in, with the addition of Orlando Brown as well, this offensive line might actually go from a weakness to a strength in no time for Cincinnati. Another guy I'm a bit higher than PFF on is Cam Smith, and I think it's a bit wild that they have him as a second rounder, because his one concern was that they weren't sure if he was going to be athletic enough to be a high level corner, and he tested very well at the combine. So there really shouldn't be too many things holding him back from being a first rounder. And especially with the Saints needing corner, Marshawn Lattimore was pretty much their only sturdy corner last year. So they need a physical man corner, and they have it with Cam Smith. So I think this is a great marriage of player and team. Bijan Robinson would make a ton of sense with the Eagles' 30th pick, but I think they have more pressing needs down the line, and one of those could actually be, surprisingly enough, cornerback, and Emmanuel Forbes will be a nice fill-in for the time being as a rotational player, but he could also be a long-term starter as an outside corner or as a nickel corner as well. He's shown a ton of versatility, as he was mostly an off-coverage zone for Mississippi State this past year, but he also excelled in the minimal man he was in. So he's shown a good propensity to be able to succeed in a variety of systems that I think he could be used as a versatile chess piece for the Eagles moving forward. The final pick of the first round will be DeJuan Jones, who is a massive behemoth at 6'8", 350, and he really knows how to put his weight into you as a run blocker. But what's impressive to me is he's actually pretty smooth as a pass protector as well. And as you would expect, once he gets his hands on you, the rep is over. And that's pretty easy to do with his incredible length. So there's a lot to like for hope with him, that if he can refine his skill set just a little bit further, he could be one of the very best tackles in the NFL. And shout out to PFF's Mike for this one, Mike Renner. He pointed out that if you're going to contain rush a quarterback, you're going to want a massive tackle like Jones, because he's not going to have to worry about the speed rush. He's only going to worry about you kind of standing there and waiting for you like a prey. So if they're going to contain rush Mahomes, they're going to have to deal with the massive paws of DeJuan Jones. So as you can see, every pick is now up. I'll go down to the very bottom. And if you've made it this far in the video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Also, comment what you think. No disrespect to Bijan Robinson not being in the first round. I think if I had to grade him on basically every aspect of his game, I would give him an A or an A plus. It's just hard to find a place that is good enough at every position and would also have the use for a high volume running back.